on compliance. And I just wanted to start the morning session with a bit of an introduction. So everybody who's on the webinar knows why we're here. My role this morning is taking the role of the managing director of an organization who is concerned about our information security and cybersecurity, and to try and to tease out of you some of the things that I really ought to know in that role, and also to help our colleagues who are looking to implement this kind of system, and how best to deal with the challenge of dealing with the slightly doubting chief executive that they may come across. So that's my role. I've been in business leadership for quite some time. I've coached CEOs, and I've also got a great deal of interest in this particular area of security within business. But probably more importantly for the audience, tell us a bit more about you, because I know you very well, and you're the complete guru of ISO standards, and have trained all over the world and implemented as a consultant many times. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about your background and also your particular interest in this standard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I've been eating and sleeping these standards for a while. So my name is Muhamed Farooque. So today, my role would be acting as a consultant, for Mark when he comes up with his worries and queries in terms of how ISO 27001 can be implemented, not just as a standard, but as more of a business reputation and business results, and the bottom line and everything else. So it is not a ticking a box exercise. And a bit about me is I play as a consultant. I've been doing it for a while, almost 21 years or 22 years. So what happened was that whenever we were doing these consulting engagements, we saw that most of our customers were really struggling to implement what has been designed throughout the session. And especially, most of these customers, ended up having a ticking a box exercise and more for commercial reasons. And, so we thought, why can't we have a system, which can enable all of our customers to, practice what we said is more important with business as usual, not just as a separate system, because most of these customers, what we have seen is that, they build systems after systems after systems, on top of the business as usual, but that never talks to the business as usual. It is kept as an isolated one. So we thought, business is more important, and everything what has been done is to actually improve the business. So let's look at it today, Mark. How this is going to be helpful for all of us, including me and my business, and including you and your business. Hopefully, yeah. We can cover all those areas and worries which you have for your business and your customers and your supplies and the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. So one of the things that obviously to get this kicked off and the ball rolling is that obviously we've heard a lot in the last few months about the risks that are now posed to organizations by cybercrime, whether that's by government actors or by organized criminal organizations. And I know that there's a lot going off in this space, and certainly I think our colleagues in the consulting world will have seen organizations popping up offering to implement ISO 27001 simply by downloading a bit of software. And clearly there's a big issue going on right now. And I certainly am very aware that there is a whole industry that's been built up in the criminal world that's looking to exploit vulnerabilities in cyber. And obviously 27001 is a great place for everybody to start in order to get their company focused on cybersecurity. So I guess my first question for this morning is if I'm concerned about that new environment, whether I'm going to be under attack by a foreign government that doesn't like the country I operate in, or if I'm going to be under attack because a criminal sees an opportunity to ransom my data for return, where do I get started? What do I do first? What do I need to do?
Yeah, first of all, it's great to see that the CEOs and MDs of these days have got great awareness. These attacks and threats have been in existence for a long time, but sadly, it was not being made aware, or these top management was not really aware of it, and they thought it is something to do with the IT, and they never took it seriously. But good to see that the awareness is growing. And rather than talking a lot about it, I can quickly show you where do we get started, when we typically, because, as you said, Mark, there are plenty of systems which has come out, as a solution, for ISO 27001 as a tool to implement ISMS. And it is not just about implementing ISMS in your business. It is more about how is it connected to your organizational structure? How is it connected to your business objectives? And what's the impact it's going to have? And in terms of deviating from there, in terms of your contractual obligation. So if you have a risk, in terms of information security, what are the areas it's going to impact? Is it going to impact you financially? Is it going to impact you contractually? Is it going to impact you legally? But if you don't have a comprehensive system, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to look at your, holistic business and, your business as a whole. And, so you won't get the complete picture. You may always get to see that, okay, you are in compliance with ISO 27001. So what? What is in it for you? Okay, so you're in compliance. You may be a part of some exciting tenders, but other than that, what else are you looking at? So is it just about ISO 27001 information security, or is it a bit more on, like the cybersecurity frameworks and, cyber essentials? And when you travel into different countries, the name changes, Mark, but the standards, you can see plenty of standards. So you cannot have one system just to capture information security. There are plenty of other systems. So how do you interact with them? So let me just quickly show you, where do we get started, just to answer your question. So what we do here is that, we started, we start by asking, where exactly are you today? So do you really need a consultant for this? I don't think it is, just to say, so you can see the entire standard here. So if you really want to see that, what's your commitment as a leader, you were talking about, what's your commitment as a leader, you can actually see here and say that, I have got all the questions available here. All you have to say here is that, we just have to read this, what's your commitment as a leader? And you say that, okay, I have this available. When you say I have this available, you also need to make sure that, you're attaching that document into the system, right? So what happens is that, when you do this, and let's assume that, you have it partially available, right? So what you can do here is that, you can just say partially available, and you can just set an action here, right? So you can set an action for few people, let's say from your information security team or IT team to do the necessary action, or the business team to do the necessary action, and they will get a notification and they can start working on it. And the most important thing is that every time you answer the question, everywhere you click on, so let's say you want to look at your, let's say your business objectives or information security objectives, all you have to say is that, you have it or not. But the most important thing here is that, whenever you answer the question, the system will automatically, give you a scoring, right? So every time you answer a question, so when we generally start, we could see that, okay, the companies are generally at 20 or 30% or 40 or 50%. And every time you're filling a gap, the system will automatically score it, into the next level. So if you're at 40, you've added a few more documents, and the system will take you to, 50 and 60. So do you really need a consultant to do it? I don't think so. But you can also track your actions. right? Every time you assign an action to somebody, you can also, as a CEO, you can say that, okay, what is the status of each of the action? So the problem generally is when you work with a consultant, the consultant only work with the IT team or, a few, business information team or, chief information officer, but they don't really work with the entire business. So this is where you being a leader, you have a complete visibility of every single activity which is done. And every time you add any document into the system, that you can actually see that, that is visible for every single person in the business. So you can see that all the policies for your information security is very much available here. So you don't need to search for it, like you've got the complete package available. All you have to do is that, you have to tweak it based on the organizational need, and, and you can just practice it. So you have got the complete templates ready, and you can see your policies here, and you can see all the policies here, right? And, so the rest of the documents and everything else. So where do you start here is just doing an assessment. After the assessment, every time you add a new document into the Knowledge Hub, and the system will automatically place that into, the organizational policies, which acts as a communicator to the entire organization. Would this be useful, for somebody like you? Like how big is your organization, Mark?
It's 100 odd people, so it needs that interconnectivity. I was interested because actually one of the things you've identified here is that I suspect that this as a tool for consultants to use is a really powerful tool for the consultant, because actually they don't spend their time on implementation in terms of going through this assessment. What they're able to do is to do that thing you talked about earlier, which is the importance of culturally embedding these processes within the organization. And often the biggest challenge that I find as a CEO is having the skill set to be able to explain to my organization what the importance of what we're doing. And one of the things I've always found is that a really good consultant coming in at that point and using that knowledge is more beneficial to the organization than someone who is essentially just going through and completing and adding documents to a system. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so so it's basically whenever the consultant comes in, and like you have the complete visibility, like you see on the screen, you have the complete visibility of your cybersecurity framework, your information security framework, or if you have got multiple offices of those specific regions, right? So what happens is that you've got this complete visibility, and when you look at your business, and you can see that you were talking about what were your question, Mark? Can you just come back to it again?
It's just the ability of this tool to enable consultants who are really, really knowledgeable to be able to use that knowledge more extensively to support the business in the journey of embedding the culture of cybersecurity into the business, rather than it just being a box ticking exercise to make sure all the documents are in place.
Yeah. So you can see that you have all the documents. You have all the documents here. Which is I'm sorry, just give me a minute. So if you can see that you have your entire documentation over here. So if you just come on here and click on this, you can see that every single element. So if I go to the policy, I could see that all my policies are available here. So you can see that it's a complete package. So you don't need to really be depending on a consultant, and the consultant can easily the consultant can easily do 10 consulting projects just by having this, and and empowering the clients to do more. So the consultants generally have to spend a lot of time with these customers if they don't understand it. But if you bring that in this format, it becomes kind of very easy for you to look at it. And your entire document control also is covered, completely by using this, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so you'll have
So
a complete package of your documents and your library and everything else.
yeah. So one of the things that obviously I'm aware of within cybersecurity, and I can see it here, is the really challenging. Well, I'm told by the IT team that it's the challenging part, which is working out the statements of applicability, because they said I'm told there are loads of them, and it's a real challenge to establish their applicability. But just talk me through your sort of approach to statements of applicability and how this tool can enable consultants and business leaders to perhaps crack that really quite difficult nut as part of the ISMS standard and the process.
Yeah, as you can see here, Mark, you've got a specific folder or specific module just to cover ISMS as a whole. And, but before you go here, you can actually go to your business process management, and you have the option of adding all the 114 controls, which is that lot, which is explained by, your IT team. So you can add all the controls over here, and this can be connected to your organizational processes. So there are controls like, how do you do your background verification, and how do you do your how do you make sure that the privileges are taken off if somebody's resigned, so that he cannot destroy your system. So just to answer your question, Mark, statement of applicability was an unknown territory for many people, because because it was kept in spreadsheets and it was not talking to each other, right? Like it was not talking to the real business. Here you just have to say that you just have to look at your statement of applicability here, and you can simply say that it's applicable or not applicable. I don't think it is clicking a button is really tough, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind, yeah. And if it is applicable, you would say, have you implemented it? What have you done to implement it? And if it is not applicable, you would probably justify why is it not applicable, right? So let's say that, not just for the auditor, before the auditor comes, I would seriously request you to look at it and say that, okay, what are you doing to, you can see this, there's no rocket science. You can see the controls. What kind of controls are we talking about, right? So you can see, so you can see, so the number 2, right? So is it, yeah. So are these rocket science? These are basic business information security. And, how are you managing a supply relationship? How are you managing your human resources? How are you managing your communication security? Every single element is captured here. And all you're saying is that, is it applicable to me? And if it is applicable to me, it is up. Yeah. So by doing this, the next thing is that, after doing this, you can get on to a risk register, right? You can actually complete a risk management process, so you've got a complete risk management process where you can identify your risk, your cybersecurity risk, your information security risk, by department, and by divisions, and by functions. And it's like an easy process for people to practice it. Would that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, okay, I understand that. So you've got the capacity to have that very long list of statements of applicability available and easy to use. And the other thing I was interested in that you mentioned was the ability to connect those controls both to risk management, but also directly back to individuals in the organization.
Yeah.
So that these things aren't, well, I've heard it described before. In fact, it might have even been if you said it, that we either have a risk list or we have a real risk register that's alive.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think you're talking about there is the ability to connect people, risk, and real life together to enable the company to understand exactly where it is in terms of risk, whether that's ISMS or in other areas of the business. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. And so what happens is that when you look at your risk, so especially when you're doing your information security risk management, you have to identify your critical information assets, by going through the asset management. So you can go and list your intellectual property assets, your tangible and non-tangible, information assets, and then you can measure the criticality of that information security piece. and then you can conduct a risk assessment. So you can actually see that, so you can see a risk map, based on your criticality, based on the category, based on the department, and, based on the division. So, and, anything you want, so basically you would get to see that, which area of my business needs, needs immediate attention. Where is it bleeding, right? So it's important that, it's important that, so it's important that, and more importantly, Mark, it is important for you to have that visibility more than anybody, because risk metrics is not done for the sake of completing a list register and satisfying the auditor, because whenever you identify these risks also can be connected to your organizational strategy. So it's important that, so you have this risk identified, then it is connected to your organizational strategy within ISO robot itself. So what I'm talking about here, when you actually implement information security, you need to have a strong information security strategy as an organization, which can also be captured within ISO robot, to have a robust implementation.
So I was actually thinking of this. So, the consultants that I've dealt with in my time, actually what this again enables them to do is to add real value to my business, because instead of it being a question of all of my effort goes into just simply making sure that the audit's complied with, I'm actually creating an opportunity for the business owner to do root cause analysis, to understand the real challenges in the business, which, when it comes to whether that's fines or contract management, there's some real pound or dollar value attached to that. Have you seen that has given you as a consultant an expanded ability to add some real value to the businesses that you work with?
I think, the real value to the business, if I may answer that question, ISO robot has got an efficient thing called, when you go and conduct your audit, you can actually look at, what is the impact of every audit you've conducted. So you can say that, okay, I have done an audit, and there was a compliance deviation, and because of this compliance deviation, I've actually had X amount of money to be paid, as a fine. So you can actually look at, each and every finding, and then you can basically show that, what is a finding you had. So let's assume that you've done a customer campaign on information security, right? And so what happened after that was, because of you've done a customer campaign, you have increased the customer confidence, and you have retained 3 of your new customers which were about to go. So where would you see this? So when you do your internal audit, you would get to see that, these internal audits are carried out, and these are the positive findings, and this is the impact. At the same time, if you had to pay, if you had a compliance deviation, you can also always see that, what is the amount of money you paid as fine, how many customers have you lost, and what's the reputational impact you've had, and how many places you've got blacklisted or whatever it is. So it's all connected, so, and the real money value, if you want me to tell you, Mark, we've got an organization, who is with 100 auditors, and, they are practicing, information security and cyber security, and, everything else big time. And they've got 34 systems in place, and they're saving $15 million in a year, if you have to really look at the money value. And plus that average, I could see 55% of the time can be saved, if you have an interactive system which is talking to each other, and which is talking to different departments and consultants, and to the business owner, and to people like you.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Some real pound or dollar value associated with this. Just before we, obviously, let's move on from the more complex bits of controls and statements of applicability, and look at obviously we're looking at ISO 27001, but also I think you mentioned the Cyber Essentials framework in the UK and Cyber Essentials Plus. Is it possible to bring in those other cyber security standards, whether it's the UK version or the Saudi Arabian network, Saudi Arabian security policy? Are those things that we're able to pull in together into the system, or is it just an ISO 27001 tool?
Mark, as I told you in the beginning, this tool is something really specific for any business. So what this does is that, simply speaking, what this does is that, if you have a system in place, it will help you to manage all the systems and frameworks, not just ISO 27001. And if you don't have a system in place, it would help you to be in a system, right? So this can be started by anybody who's got no ISO certifications, no local and no regional and regulatory, regional standards and guidelines, or no global standards and guidelines. Or also this can be started by companies who's got 1 standard, 10 standards, or 20 standards. So to answer your question specifically, every country we work with more than 70 plus countries. Every country we work with, you can see information security named in different ways. If you go to South Africa, it's called POPI. If you go to UK, you can see Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, right? But ISMS remains as the key thing. If you go to US, you can see NIST, as an information security framework, right? So the CSF framework is now becoming a trend for every country to have a national cybersecurity framework, which is the initiative from the government itself, and it is made mandatory for most of the countries. But to answer your question, you can add as many standards and guidelines here, and you can start with the same process of getting started with the gap assessment. So
you've just opened there a gap assessment for Cyber Essentials, I see. And it operates in exactly the same format that you would if you were looking to use ISO Robot to implement ISO 27001. There's no change in the process. It's the same series that you go through.
It is the same series you go through, and you can also see that so the amount of standards you can have within the system. So you can have as many standards as you want, and you can have as many folders as you want. And if you have got your favorite folder, cybersecurity, you can just bookmark it, or you can just say that these are important to me, right? And more importantly, this also has the access control, because when I log in, I would get to see what is assigned to me. Because in information security, it's important that you have the control over your entire documentation. You can see all the public documents here. You can see all the shared documents here, and you can see all the documents which are in review. So you can see your entire documentation, which is categorized in back and forth from all the angles. And whenever the government brings a new cybersecurity framework, whenever the government looks at the SOX framework for the country, similar to what we have in the US, you don't need to do anything. You just have to go to the compliance or knowledge hub, and you need to make sure that these are added within the system. And most of the time, we will add ourselves within the system as and when the new standard is published for that region. So your library will be always updated. You don't need to find that. We will do it, for you. That's how it works.
Okay. So let's just summarize where we've got to so far, because we've covered a lot of ground. But we've got a global situation in which cybersecurity is becoming certainly top of the agenda, and it's certainly rising up government agenda if it's not the top of their agenda as well, which we're seeing this plethora of standards cropping up in the world. And obviously we've got the key ISO standard of 27001 that governs, it's the governor of all of these processes, and having that in place, that we're seeing that there are vendors out there who are looking simply just to give people a tool to get the badge of 27001 into their system. And what you've talked about is that ultimately cybersecurity is not about the badge, it's about the cultural shift in the organization, which you only get if you've got that connectivity between people, process, and the management of the risk that's, in this particular case, is the cyber risk. And you've also talked us through what for some is quite a daunting, complicated area around the statement of applicability and understanding how do I get through that workload of identifying which of these things are applicable to me, and then how do I manage that outside of a spreadsheet environment and outside of a list environment. So we've covered those important topics. And I guess the other thing that we've really wrapped that around is that this is not a tool that takes away the opportunity for consultants to work with their customers. Actually, it's a tool that enhances the high-skilled consultant whose interest is not producing documents. It's about creating that long-term cultural change and improvement for the business. And you also identified from a showing the value of what's being delivered. Actually, consultants can actually say to organizations, if you use this system, you get that better cultural shift, and you also get significant both cost savings, but also through the management of risk, you can identify opportunities to improve or opportunities to save money as well. So you've got that wrapper around it. So having done that bit of a summary, one of the other areas that I guess is a real challenge is just the amount of documentation that any implementation of standards requires. How does the tool that ISO Robot is enable that to be done in an efficient and an environmentally friendly kind of way? How do we operate the documentation part?
Yeah, so if you look at this, and you have got the entire documentation folders, and so these are not just every time you publish a document, you've got your ISMS documentation here, and you've got your manual here. So when you look at your manual, you can see that, okay, the manual is completely added here. So you can see that, the manual is here. And, so what happens is, so all these information are readily available. And like what I showed you in the beginning, so every time you add a policy, it's important that, the policy needs to be communicated to every stakeholder. So whoever has the access to the system, and it's completely paperless, Mark. You don't need to, if a consultant is doing 10 projects in a year, I could easily say that, okay, they can do 30 or 40 projects in a year. We are doing it as consultants. That's the reason I'm telling you, because a consultant goes in, every time he spends, plenty of time, changing the culture of the organization. And the most important thing, which every consultant struggled, including us, is to make sure that, the engagement and participation of the stakeholders are not generally there. And especially we exit from the project as a consultant. So if I come and work with you for 6 months, you would think that, okay, I'm paying this guy, let him do all the work. You won't really participate. And, from the time I start and by the time I come out of the consulting project, what happens is that, you're kind of handicapped, and the consultant would really struggle to go back to them and convince them again and again in terms of making it more efficient. But in this case, they can actually use the system in terms of building all the documentation. Even for reviewing and approving it, you can utilize the same system. And, even for change management, you can use the same system. And what happens is that, by the time you complete the consulting engagement, you can just pass on the system to them so that they can practice it. So you do a gap assessment by using the system, where they are. So you don't need to have a real project plan. You can actually say that, okay, I'm at 30% right now. Like when I add a few areas, I become 35, I become 40. So you don't need to have a performance review kind of a thing. The system automatically tells you where exactly you are. And it can also tell you how many, how many actions are pending in order for you to reach 100 or 95. So before you call an external auditor, you being the business owner or the managing director, you're confident by yourself, seeing that, okay, your SOA is completed, your documentations are in place, your policies are published, right? And more importantly, you also make sure that you've got a dynamic organization structure, and you have got your people, and the roles are captured, so you can see that, so the entire profile, so the roles of the people, and the job descriptions, everything can be completely captured within the system itself. And I would like to also tell you one more point, I think probably, which you would have been thinking, is when you start a consulting project, you have two ways, Mark. One is you can decide to go as just as a more like, okay, I just want to get started, I want to have all the documents in place, and I want to get certified, I want to have the basics in place based on the standard requirement, so that you can taste the success. But please don't stop there. Make sure that you go for a robust implementation if you're really looking at making some real benefits for the business. But if there are people, because as consultants, we would get to see different type of customers, they would say, we are least bothered about an efficient process. All we need is, the auditor has to come in, and I have to be a part of the tender, and I've got only 2 months, right? If that's the case, you've got everything ready here. You can just use the documentation and the assessment module, and you can just complete everything else. But if you're really serious about it, you can actually go in and complete your risk management, complete your compliance register, complete your asset register, and everything else, so it's more detailed. So what's your thoughts on, what are you planning? Are you going for a quick fix and then going into the next level? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, really, in terms of, a lot of the time I'll be interested in many of the ISO standards just because I've seen on the latest tender that I have to have it, or I have to have cyber essentials to enable me to be part of this tender. And I was interested to hear there that actually, did you say in a matter of weeks, if I want to just do a paper exercise, this tool enables me to get to a position where I could be audited and get my standard within a few weeks if it was an urgent need?
I would say, the system is ready to go live yesterday, like if you really wanted to, but I won't really encourage you to go for a certification just by having the system, because it's important that, your people understands what is inside the system, what is a backup policy means, and what is a network policy means, and, what is supplier relationship management for the entire business, and what are the controls in place. So I would say that, you would take a bit of the time to complete, some of the major risks to be identified, and, even in that paper exercise, and then go for the certification. That's more like, I've got all the documents in place, and I've got all the templates in place, and I've got the SOA. You start with the assessment, you update the SOA, and you take care of your documentation. Then you start practicing them for a while. But if you're really serious about it, and if you really want to go with it, definitely you can go within weeks. But I won't recommend you to go within weeks. But if that is business urgent, I know that, CEOs like yours, you want to earn a lot of money, and in a quick fashion, because I don't want to miss that tender, you can be a part of it, right? But most importantly, you can demonstrate your competence or your system to any third party, from day one, rather than just demonstrating it in a file or a folder. So this is more important. You can actually, when you're submitting a tender, if there is a question on compliance, you can even attach the screenshots of the system and say that, okay, you know what, I've got this in place. That boosts and increases the customer confidence.
Okay, so you've ticked some of my boxes then, obviously, so I can get on the tender list, because we can get over the hurdle if it's urgent. But unlike say another tool where it's just solely a 27001 tool to get myself certified, this enables me to go on a longer journey of longer term business improvement around people, process, and technology to enable me to significantly enhance the performance of my business and ultimately its value. Is is that the journey that you can take me on using this tool?
Yes, it is. Mark, one more most important thing is that, when you go on a thinking about exercise, it doesn't really connect your actual business as usual, right? But in this case, I know you can actually look at, not just for information security compliance, it would also take care of your entire governance. So when I say governance, for me, the definition of governance is conformance plus performance, right? So I have done my information. So let's say if I was your information security manager and, I'm coming and telling you, hey, you know what, Mark, we are successfully certified. And, we have certified for ISO 27001. We've completed the audit with 0 findings. So you would ask me, so what is in it for me, right?
Yeah.
So what if I come and tell you that, we are successfully certified, for ISO 27001, and, which is actually connected. And we have identified some of the major information security and cybersecurity risks against our organizational objectives, which is achieving $100 million. So we cannot achieve our $100 million, target without, treating or, controlling those risks. So that's a kind of visibility I think you want, right? So what kind of barriers do you have in terms of, in terms of your customers, your supplies, your objectives, and your finances and your cash flows? It's much more beyond than the standard. You need to understand, is there any barrier which would impact my cash flow, which would impact my reputation, which would impact my customer satisfaction? So it's like this, Mark, when you don't have a system which is completely connected, the quality department does a customer satisfaction, customer satisfaction review, and you're always on 99.99. I think you would agree with me on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And when it comes to your customer retention, or, so you can actually see that, okay, your 30% of your customers have actually left you, right?
Yeah.
So what is the problem? Is it the quality department, or is it the procurement department, or the sales department, or finance department? The problem is nothing. The problem is when the procurement comes and tells you, and finance comes and tells you, you have lost 30% of your customer, he would position it in such a way that, like, this is okay. But when the quality comes and tells you 99.99% of our customers are happy, you're extremely happy, but you're not seeing the connection and the integration.
Yeah.
So if your customers are happy, they should not be leaving you, right?
Yeah.
So this is the sense. Yeah, this is the sense you should make out as a CEO, as a managing director of a business.
So that's interesting. So I can see then that the tool that I've come to talk to you about in order to get my 27001 certificate to enable me to get on the tender is actually part of a series of building blocks. If I was working with a consultant who could then start to talk to me about improvements in other areas of the business using ISO standards, but enabling me to improve my strategy, my people, my processes, my sales across the whole run of my business, I would then be directed towards some real world value add elements from initially a 27001 engagement with a consultant.
Yeah, I would seriously say yes, because if I give you an example, most of the times when you apply for a tender, you would have seen that, or you can check with your IT team, whenever they request for an information security certification, they would also ask for, a business continuity certification as well, right? So, you have an information security system right now. So what do you do when you need a business continuity management system? When you need a quality management system, what do? You go and buy another software, right? The purpose of that is, so you have an organization and you have a business and you've got certain business goals. All what you're doing is to actually improve the performance of the business, win more customers, win more money, and keep your employees, happy, keep your customers happy, right? But all the systems you're building, if it is standing, or if it is residing outside your business as usual, without having any connection, then there's no fun. Because every time you have a system, it needs to connect your people it needs to connect your processes, and it needs to connect your organization structure, and it also needs to connect your assets. So
Yeah.
without these basic building blocks, you can't really make an integrated system. And if they are not talking to each other, whatever you do, it's kind of satisfying the auditor, kind of satisfying your team, and the consultant always wants to do the best job, but you think that, okay, that's too much for me to understand, so you don't really get in there. But in this case, what do you think? Is it going to be a good approach having such a methodology in place?
I love the idea of a methodology whereby the consultant isn't coming in simply to go through and produce, the old days of a paper manual that would sit on my shelf that no one would ever read. And actually, what I'm getting is I'm getting all of that compliance piece, but over and above it, I'm getting some real value for my business that enables me to use what looks like a protective standard to actually improve my business and make it more effective and, as I say, a better, stronger business in the way that you described it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an attractive tool because it becomes a business management process engine and an improvement engine, not just a piece of I need to tick this box to move on to win the next tender.
Yeah, I would seriously say that, yes, exactly, Mark. This is a business management system. Like I said in the beginning, it's like this. I was doing a presentation in Africa, to be specific, in Kenya, to a group of people from the parliament. And, I did speak about ISO robots so loud and clear for almost 1.5 hours. And, one gentleman, raised his hand and he said, hey, what's your name? I said, Farooque. So he said, I did not understand any single thing you said for the last 90 minutes. I'm so sorry for being blunt. And, so please tell me, what is in it for me? How does it's going to help? I said, if you have a system, it would help you to capture that system into that and manage it effortlessly by having all the people interacting with each other. And the biggest benefit would be your customer interaction. The biggest benefit would be your employee engagement and participation, so that it is not a job of a consultant or an IT manager. It becomes a job of an entire business. And if you're the owner of the business, you are accountable to manage that. Then he said, what if I don't have a system, right? Then I said, if you don't have a system, the system, ISO robot already has all the frameworks and practices in place. All you have to do is fill the forms and you will automatically fall into a system. So then he said, how do I do that? I said, all you have to do is that you just have to call your people into the system. So if you have a HR management system, it can simply connect and import the people into the system. Then once you add the people into the system, it automatically designs an organization structure. It's dynamic. You don't need to create that, right? Then it is, when you add a new standard into the system, it automatically registers in compliance management module, right? So it forms a compliance register. It forms a standard list of documents. He said, that's exciting. Yeah. So, now I'm coming to understand what it is. So it could be, like a different level of maturity in different regions and different countries. But I would seriously say this is a system which is more like, the Lego blocks. So you can pick and choose what is important for you in the beginning. I won't recommend you to go with all the 21 modules where the system has. All you have to do is that start with your information security where you have started. Start as the basic information of completing the documentation and going for the certification, if you just want to do that by completing the assessment and the documentation. And then you can extend it to the next level so that people have enough time to digest the information as well.
Okay. So I'm conscious of time, and
yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground, and we've now got the ISO robot tool that can not only just deal with ISO standards. We can pull in Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. But the other area, and I know because we've talked about this before, is something you were mentioning, and you were tantalizing me with it, which is a piece of software around protecting my data once I've migrated it to the cloud, because I know myself and a lot of other business leaders are seeing their systems migrating into the cloud. And you mentioned I shouldn't really assume that that means that all of my data is safe. And so can you just tell me a little bit about the tool that you say that we're offering with ISO Robot as a way of organizations protecting the back door to their organization as well as the front door?
Yeah, that's an exciting thing, like we don't just stop by creating a tool, and we know that as and when the businesses are growing, and every day when the technology is growing, the vulnerabilities and threats are going. So you need to have a system, and which is continuously scanning your cloud environment and tell you what kind of vulnerabilities you have within your business, right? So we have designed a tool called cloud integrity. And what happens is that whenever you go for an ISO, like whenever you go with ISO Robot, we also make sure that you also get that tool with that, just to test and understand it, and say that I have done my complete scanning of my cloud environment. Because even if you have the cloud expert within your business, he may not understand the cloud environment because it's so massive. You talk about Azure, you talk about AWS, you talk about Google Cloud. It's not easy for anybody who's at an organizational level to go and understand the threats and vulnerabilities. But if you have got a serious scanner, which tells you, what are the areas, what are the issues you want to look into it, and we've got a dedicated team who can come and assess this for you and who can advise you on that. And that's a completely different thing. But for you to get started with the assessment, 3 months would be more than enough. So with this, we would also offer you, a kind of a 3 month subscription to, the cloud integrity, which is a scanner, the ultimate scanner, Mark. So Mark, it would tell you, what are the areas you should look into, in terms of your cloud threats. Would that be interesting for you?
It was really interesting because what I learned was that it's very clearly stated in the AWS and the Azure terms and conditions of business that they're not responsible for any data breach occurred because of my mistake. So I've got a lot of data sat in those cloud platforms, and we've got a mixed cloud environment. Yeah. So I'm feeling a bit at risk. So kind of with this tool and a consultancy approach, you've identified ways that I can create a process where cybersecurity and ISMS is embedded into my organization at a cultural level, which is, I think most consultants would say that the only way that you can start to get real security is if it's embedded in the business and it's not just a process. Yeah. So you've identified ways that we can do that. And actually, by the sounds of it, you're also adding in additional services and pieces of software that actually enable me to not just have a process to make sure the door is locked. You're also giving me a key to the door to go and lock it, so that I've got something that I can actually practice security as well as have a process to make sure I do security.
Yeah, it is important to do that, Mark. It's not just about, having a security guard in front of the server room, the old ways of protecting your server room. He can go for a dinner, he can fall asleep, and but if you don't have a proper control over there, and if that's not been identified, so you can have as much of information as you want, but end of the day, you look at the likes of GDPR and the amount of money staring at you as fines. And more than the money, you may be so rich, more than the money, how would you claim your reputation back if in front of your customers? So this is a serious business for any CEO, not just for the quality or information security manager. This is actually real, important if you care about your business and your brand.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we're having this conversation, because obviously I've become aware of a couple of environment that really sold me as the CEO the idea that I needed to go and get a consultant to come in and build this for me. Yeah, it is that, for example, I actually went to a demonstration where an ethical hacker hacked into a system and bypassed two-factor authentication based on extracting the details it needed by a phishing attack, where he simply went to a new member of the team and said, "Hi, I'm the CEO, welcome." And the new member of the team hadn't done their phishing training, immediately supplied their credential data to the phishing attack. And as a result, they bypassed two-factor authentication, got into the email of the finance director, saw where all the payment details were going, and had complete control of the business, and then planted a piece of ransomware into the system, which was like a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Just at the point when that company was about to announce something to the stock market, they would immediately encrypt the whole of the data and demand huge amounts of Bitcoin to turn that data back on. So I, as a CEO, see that and think, I really need to start doing something about protecting my systems and working with really good consultants and good tools to get.
Mark, I think that's a brilliant point. Let's not forget the fact that, when you talk about ethical hacker and when you talk about all these good systems, there's another side of it as well, like they're also building those systems to hack everything what you're making, right? So there are these real hackers, and there are this black web kind of the business where you can actually find out every single thing to break every system, like let it be ISO robot, let it be any system in the world, any best system in the world, or the system, let's say if they can get into White House, if they can get into any of these big buildings, by hacking it, they are capable of doing it. But it's important that, people have got the awareness of, like what you said, word to click, word not to click. Because even if you have the best system, if your people are not aware of the things which they're supposed to do and they're not supposed to do, and if they're not being practiced what they're supposed to do, so if they don't have the awareness and the knowledge of that, there's no point doing it. That is the only reason we always recommend you to have a consultant, because you may have the best tool in the world, but there has to be an interpreter, at least for the first time, who would come and execute this job for you. And after that, you can simply manage it by yourself, whereas the consultant can have a peaceful holiday as well. Being a consultant, like even though I go to my house, I'm with my mom, I could still get a lot of emails and calls just because I'm a consultant, so it's a 24/7 thankless job. So, so if you have tools like this, if you have technologies like this, it would help you to have a system in place. I won't say it would do any magic for you, but the first time you need to have all the information in place. And let me tell that also to you, Mark, you would have seen a lot of modules and a lot of information to be added into the system. For the first time, we would make sure that all your existing documentations are added into the system. All your people are onboarded in the system. All the assets are onboarded in the system by our project management team. So you don't need to really worry about, who would do this for me. And, for the first time, the system really well. But most importantly, before we do that, we would also get that organized, because, we understand, this domain quite a while and for quite some time. And we are not just a technology company. We understand this domain really well. And so with your consultant, we can help and assist the consultant as well as you, and, to make it bigger and better.
That's great, Farooque. Well, that hour has flown by this morning. I really enjoyed our conversation. It's always great to talk to you about something and someone so knowledgeable about ISO standards and business process. So thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. I hope our guests this morning have enjoyed the conversation and have taken away some real insights and opportunities from the conversation. So I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us and making that hour pass so quickly and so enjoyably.
Yeah. So, so I've really enjoyed the conversation, Mark, you being the managing director, and, I could see that, you're actually participating and, like making sure that, you really want to, build your organization bigger and better. All the best for that. Like we say that, let's talk again. And, because technology is growing every day, and, threats are growing every day. So your scanner has to be on. it's like more like a surveillance camera fitted 24/7, and it is giving you the intelligence before this happening, more like a preventive system rather than after happening, and more like reactive one. So I think we can also take some questions if the audience has any questions.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So Mark, if that's okay, yeah.
Yeah, so we can, if anybody's got any questions, we can deal with that in the chat box, I think is probably the best way for us to do it.
Yeah, and you can also see that, so you can also see that, we've got our contact details here. So you can just write, so you can use the WhatsApp number to chat, or you can just email to us. And, and also, if you really want to look at the system, we can show you a demo, we can do a proof of concept, and, so depending on where you are. And please remember the fact that, this is not just for ISO 27001, it could be for any system in terms of your information security and cybersecurity and any other framework. So if others are watching and if they think that, okay, they need a system for, say for the strategy, their internal audit, so the quality and all these things, we can always talk on those as well.
That's super. So I think our audience is being a little shy this morning because we haven't got any more questions to take now. So I think that probably now brings our webinar to an end. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Farooque, for participating. And we look forward to seeing you again when we will talk some more ISO standards. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I would say thank you very much, everyone. So, and it's been a real pleasure seeing you all virtually. And, hopefully we can catch up again. We'll have more webinars coming in, so we can keep talking on those. And, thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much for keeping me alive, Mark, so throughout the session. Yeah.
My pleasure. My pleasure as always.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Farooque, we have a question.
Yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So what's the question? Okay. What AI element is available in ISMS? That's a brilliant question. So what we are working on right now is that we are working on bringing in predictive analytics. So in the risk management. So you've got a lot of, like Mark said, you've got a lot of external threats happening in different regions. So so we are currently working on it, and this would be coming into the system soon. So what this would be is basically, it would do a micro and macro scanning for all the risks identified across in different regions. And, based on the historic data and based on the market risk and based on all the risks available internally and externally, the system will automatically predict the upcoming risk and its impact. So, and it would do an automatic, automated risk assessment as well. So what it's going to do is that, it would bring in the predictive risk assessment, and, it would basically tell you, looking at what kind of risks which has happened so far, looking at what kind of context we have in the business, the system will automatically would be able to predict those upcoming risks. And one more thing, which we are working on is, like I said at the end, we're also working on a proactive control monitoring system. So if I give you an example of a proactive control monitoring system, when you have 100 people joining in your business last year, and if the standard is asking you to do, a background verification for every time somebody walks into your business, and when you go for an audit, generally you may not be able to cover all the 100 people joined in your business, right? So you may take a sample of 5% or 10%, but you will not have a comprehensive view of all the people who are joined and the way controls are applied. But in this case, what the system would do is that every time somebody joins in and the background verification is not done, it would automatically send an email to, send a notification to the HR department, as well as the administration department, as well as the IT department, and all the relevant department. And if it is not addressed within a certain period of time, Mark gets an escalated email saying that, okay, this has not been done. But more than that, this was a simple example. All your controls rather than waiting for the controls to fail and audit and find out the problems on a reactive mode, the proactive control monitoring system would work more like as a control room where you will have notifications, alerts, and reminders as and when it's happening. So if you're failing, if you have problems, and you would get to see them live rather than waiting for the auditor to come and assess it, and probably after 1 year. So it won't be really useful, to know that after it happened, but it would be really useful before it's happening, so that you get the notification and you can actually trigger your preventive actions, based on what's going to happen. Yeah, so these are two things, which we are working on. There are 15, 20 use cases, which we have, our research team is working on. But over a period of next 2 years, we would have all of them. But I think within the next, before the end of the year, we have the predictive analytics, and we will also have the, proactive control monitoring basics in place. So if that's answering your question.
Thanks, Farooque.
Mark, does that excite you? Yeah.
Oh, listen, any AI that takes my brain away and uses something more useful is always useful to me.
Yeah, and AI would boost the business. It won't do any magic, but but AI would definitely boost the business to the next level. And it is more important that if you do that micro and macro scanning, and if you get to see what kind of risks are coming up for this region, for this industry, it is very, very useful. Otherwise, we always look at the risk within the business, not outside the business.
Yeah, it's the CEO's main job is to scan the horizon, looking for what's coming towards them, and a tool that enables that to happen in real time is really useful to the leader.
Yeah, so there's another question which says that, okay, can the system support multiple management system in one time? Like I was saying, so we have customers who's actually using, 34 ISO standards, using ISO robot, doing 1,200 audits, and, saving $15 million, dollar per year. And, there are other customers who saving 55% of the time. And, there are other customers, who has got their, implementation in with a lot of clarity and awareness, and people are engaging and participating in. Yes, the answer is yes, it can manage multiple management systems at the same time, and the user access can be provided to the respective owners of the standards and systems within a business, and they can have complete access control as well for the users. And one more thing, what happens is that, especially when it comes to multiple management systems, it is always the same audience who's going to be executing and supporting. So you're going to the HR manager and the finance manager whenever you have a new system, and they think that, okay, this is too much for them on top of their existing, job on a daily operational stuff. But in this case, they would get to see only what is applicable for them. The actions would be assigned to them only what is relevant to them. And the contracts and SLAs and service level agreements and everything else would be visible to those relevant departments and people, what is really applicable for them. And they all are notified every time they have to do something really important. So it's kind of easy, and it's more like a self-service system rather than more like a forced or enforced system by a consultant or a technology service provider.
Great stuff.
So any more questions before we go away? And yeah, so.
I think if there are any more questions, obviously feel free to contact.
I could see a lot of people who are the experts in the domain attending the session, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and a lot of very, 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 a lot of very, very experienced people in the session, on the list of participants. And, so, yeah, so it's always exciting to have you all. So, and thank you very much for participating. And so I think we can conclude the session with that. So, hopefully.
I think we can. And if there are any more questions, connect at excelledia.com, and either Farooque or one of the team will be happy to come back to you with any more questions. So I think without further ado, that probably brings the session to an end. Thank you very much indeed for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.